Hello, this is my Influence of Environmental Factors on Learners project. My name's Damon. Here's my table of contexts. So we have 5 chapters, all on different contexts, and then the analysis of these contexts, and some forward thinking and reflection at the end. So chapter 1 was on the classroom context. So in this chapter, I was exploring the environmental factors within the classroom that I intern in and how it's affecting the learners in there. So I used a variety of data sources to find information about this. I interviewed my mentor teacher. I took a lot of personal observations. I gathered demographics, behavioral data, and looked at the class schedule to get more information about how the classrooms ran, what it looks like, and how this impacts students. Some of the themes that I found throughout this within the classroom are routine and consistency. The classroom follows a really good routine. It's very consistent, and the students know what's expected of them. My second one was classroom behavior. I feel like the classroom is very well behaved, and my mentor teacher uses a lot of proactive planning and a systematic approach to make sure that the kids know the expectations and they can stay well behaved. And then my last theme here was demographics and diversity. It's a pretty diverse classroom with a lot of different races, ethnicities, backgrounds, learning abilities, languages spoken at home, and more. So here you can see just some more depth into these themes that I covered within the classroom context. So on reflection of this, I reflected on how this data helps me understand the diversity of families and cultural contexts connected to the classroom. On this next page, talked about how the data helps me examine how schools include and value families and communities. And then lastly was my inquiry question for this chapter, which was how do relationships within the classroom, including student to student, student to teacher, support or limit a positive learning environment? And just kind of giving a final reflection on how Mrs. Jang's classroom, the one that I analyzed, how the interactions in there, whether student to student or student to teacher, how they mostly support and at some points limit the environment being as positive for learning as possible. Those are my references for chapter 1. And then for chapter 2, I looked at the school context. So in this chapter, I'm more exploring the factors and what goes on within the whole school, which for me, I was researching Breesos Elementary and how this influences student experiences and outcomes. So this is Breesos. This is the school I've interned at. I interned at last semester and I intern at now. They have preschool through 5th grade and about 600 students. It's in Chandler, Arizona. For this chapter, I also used a bunch of data sources to find more information about the school context. So I used personal observations and my mentor teacher interview again, because I have a lot of information from there that I've gathered over the weeks. I used the Breesos website twice to look at their programs and services and how they use PBIS, which is Positive Behavioral Intervention and Supports. And then I also looked at their test scores. So the themes that I found from this data are student behavior support. Breesos offers a lot of support for students with behavior challenges. They use PBIS and they're very proactive in countering misbehavior. And they really just care for those students who are struggling and don't look with a punishment approach, but with a how can we fix these issues approach. Academic achievement was my second theme. Breesos is a very high achieving academic school. They do well. They've shown high scores on standardized tests when in comparison with other schools in other states, as well as just from personal observations. You can tell for the most part they're doing quite well in there. And then peer collaboration within the staff and the teachers of the school. Peer collaboration is a big deal. They work together a lot, and this helps them create the most positive solutions and plans for students. So here I have just more deeper info on my themes. And then in the next few pages, I do some reflections. So this reflection says, how does this data help you understand the diversity of families and cultural contexts connected to the school? The next reflection question was on how the data helps me to examine how schools include and value families and communities. And then my inquiry question was how do school-level factors such as policies, resources, staff collaboration, and programs shape student experiences and outcomes? So in those 3 slides there, I mostly just reflect on what I found through my data about the school and just how the way they run the school and the environment that they're serving, how this influences students and their outcomes. My references. So chapter 3, we talked about community context. So we're just getting broader and broader as we go, from the classroom to the school and now to the community. For this, I mostly focused on just the general neighborhood around Breesus. So, within that zip code, within that area, within the school zone. So for my data sources and findings, I have a little bit more information on these slides, but I used the U.S. Census Reporter. I used that a lot. It gave me a lot of information on median age, demographics, just kind of everything about the makeup of the people in the community. And then I also used Kyrie and Breesus' website again, this time on school culture. So this talked about some of their partnerships, some of the events they do, how they involve the community. I also used Zillow to explore just the area around Breesus and what the homes are like. The City of Chandler website, looking at Desert Breeze Park, one of the resources they have there for children. And then Google Maps, just for more exploration of the community and the town surrounding Breesus. So the themes that I ended up finding here were that they're in a very child-friendly community. They have a lot of resources for children and a lot of opportunities for academics. I also said that they're a community of high achievement, and then in particular academic achievement. Breesus itself is very academically advanced, along with some of the other schools in the area, like Aprende and Corona del Sol, which are both well-rated schools as well. And then it's also just an area of more commonly higher education in the homes and also fairly high income. So it's a well-achieving area. And then the last theme I had for the community context was school and community relationships. I'm just talking about all the events that they do and how the school involves the community within their school and how they involve their school in the community. So how they intersect to come together. And then here's just some more information on these themes. So my reflection questions here and my inquiry question, I addressed how this data helps me understand the community setting, the diversity of the families and businesses in the community, and the community's history and the cultural context, how it helps me to analyze how community settings value, incorporate, build upon, or marginalize families and communities, and how the cultural, economic, and social characteristics of the community impact the student learning and development. So basically just how all the factors in the community come together to impact students and their learning and development. Here are my references for Chapter 3. Chapter 4 was my analysis of context. So this takes all the 3 contexts that we looked into, the classroom, the school, and the community, and analyzes it and finds out what impacts these really have on student success. So I looked through all my data sources used over the course of this. And here I'm really talking about Brofenbrenner's ecological systems theory and getting into some more depth about that. So the mesosystem talks about what connections exist between the home, the school, and the community, which was really one of the main focuses of this entire project. So the last 3 chapters focus a lot on this. It just kind of breaks it apart, one level by level, classroom, school, community, and all that together and how those interact with each other is the child's mesosystem. Talked a lot about just what this mesosystem is like, how it affects students. And then we talked about the chronosystem here, which is much more broad in the ecological systems theory, talking about how changes over time influence the context of these children's environment, and also just what my role and potential influence is on these changes. So I talk about that more in these next few slides. Talk about, I mentioned COVID, as that's one of the changes over time that caused a lot of direct and indirect changes within the school system, specifically in Kyrene. Talked about voting as well. So now we'll go on to my holistic interaction review. These slides just look at what supports or inhibits student success across all contexts. So I split it into supports on this slide, and then what inhibits student success in their environment. There are more supports than inhibitors, but there are definitely some of both. So it's important to look at both sides and see what is supporting students in the environment, but also what they could do better or what is holding students back. And then on this implications of cross-domain section, I talked about what the analysis suggests about communication and coordination across these contexts. So how communication plays a part, how the school collaborates with the community to support student success. So that continues here. And then had a final reflection on this chapter with my inquiry question: in what ways do the interactions between a student's home life, school life, and community environment influence their overall development and academic success? So this section really just looks over kind of everything from it and looks over how the relationships between all those contexts we talked about, their home, their school, their classroom, and their community, how they come together to impact overall development. And then I have references for images and data sources and scholarly articles. And then chapter 5 was the final chapter in this project. So this is forward-thinking reflection. In this section, or this chapter, just really focused on why this matters and how it relates to me and my future teaching. So I set some professional development goals for myself. Some of these were to contact 2 to 5 parents a week for something positive the child did, at least over the course of a semester. Provide multiple opportunities each quarter for students to get involved in supporting the community. So this could be like food drives, toy drives, anything like that. It could be even volunteering. My third goal was to create a behavior management plan before my first year of teaching and then update this at least once per semester, maybe more if I find things that are just not working for my classroom. I also said to attend all staff, team, and PLC meetings and share ideas or questions with team members daily. Make sure I'm collaborating to put ideas together. And then considering how students' culture and personal experiences can be integrated into lessons and activities. So bringing students' culture and their backgrounds into the learning. On this slide, I just talk about my own values and how these values connect with the way I approach relationship building. So I talk about some of these values that I have, and then how this influences the way I choose to interact and build relationships with students, parents, families, and community members. I also talk here about some actionable strategies for influence, so real strategies that I'll be taking in the future to ensure that I'm influencing the environment and students in the right way, that they're able to build deeper connections and relationships, that the context within which they live in their environments, their school, their community, their family, are not working on their own, and they're working together to provide good results for students. And let's continue here. And then that's just about the end of it. So my read aloud screencast will go here. And if you click here, you can see all of my references from the entire project. Where's the stop button?